Hello and welcome to today's Delta Credit Tip. So today we're talking about your debit card. So you go into the store, you make your purchase, and the question they ask you on the pad is debit or credit. What's the difference? Well, stay tuned. We're going to fill you in on today's Delta Credit Tip. Hello and welcome back to today's Delta Credit Tip. I'm Michael Holmes, bringing you yet more information to help you in your credit restoration process. Hopefully you'll find this information helpful. If so, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that every Thursday as we come out with more information to help you in your credit restoration process, you get this information right out of the gate. It can help you make a choice to make a change here with Delta. So you're at the store, right? You're going up to pay for your purchase. You pull out your debit card, you stick it in the machine or you swipe it, and then you have to make a choice. Do you run your transaction as a debit or do you run your transaction as a credit, right? And this is with your debit card. And this is not choosing between a debit card and a credit card. This is when you choose to run your transaction as either debit or credit with your actual debit card from your bank. What is the difference? Okay, well, the main difference is how the transaction is handled by the merchant. If you run your card as a debit and you put in that PIN number, then what happens is first off, the transaction is validated by your PIN number. The second thing is that merchant will typically take that money out of your account immediately. It'll debit it out of your account either at that moment or at least by the end of that day. Okay? And it's a more immediate kind of transaction. The second alternative, running it as a credit, well, what that means is that merchant, it can, what they call, batch that transaction either that day, the next day, next week, or whatever the case may be. It's up to their discretion. And when that hits your account is when it actually comes out. Okay. Now, batching is when, let's say I own a gas station. At the end of the day, I run all my transactions at once, or I might run it every Friday, but I do it in one big batch, they call it. And then I put all my transactions through at once. So running your card as a credit gives that merchant time to process that transaction at a later date. Now, your bank, should that transaction be fraudulent, may apply more protective practices on a credit transaction than it would a debit transaction. But truth be told, that Visa or MasterCard logo on your debit card really still does afford you pretty much a lot of the same kind of protection that you would get against those fraudulent transactions. So it really doesn't matter one way or the other, except for the fact that it may take you longer to get a refund on a fraudulent charge when you use your debit card as a debit. Okay. Also, with the credit transaction, what validates that transaction is the signature on the slip. Okay, so really, by and large, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two, except that you may find that on credit transactions, there's a delay in when it actually hits your account, which if you haven't been quite paying attention to, your balances on in your account, that may afford you the opportunity to have a transaction go through and still have time to actually get money into the bank before it actually hits that bank. But I wouldn't count on that. I wouldn't bank my money on that, no pun intended, because really, under both circumstances, the only time you should use your debit card is when you actually have the money in the account. Just because you're running it as a credit doesn't mean that it's like a credit card transaction where you just simply pay them back at a later date. It's only that the merchant can run that transaction at a later date. So hopefully this information is helpful. Again, if so, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell, subscribe, and hopefully this information will help you make a choice to make a change. Delta.